Here at the Saint Constantine School, we are a community of learners of all ages. The third Thursday lecture series is an opportunity for the community to come together to hear from one of our expert faculty on a variety of subjects. I'm delighted to introduce tonight, Mr. Zachary. Many of you know Mrs. Turner as the house head of St. Elizabeth, or as the director of the upper school choir, or as the director of the Saint Constantine School and Saint Constantine College Fine Arts. You may or may not know she holds degrees in vocal music studies from the University of Kansas and the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. Mrs. Turner is a frequent music soloist and recitalist in the greater Houston area, performing with companies such as Aperitivo Houston and the Houston Grand Opera. Mr. Zachary Turner has recently graced the Saint Constantine stage as an organist and singer, occasionally, in our recent concerts. He has also notably holds degrees in piano and organ from the University of Kansas and the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, respectively, and serves as the Director of Music at St. Mary's Seminary. Will you please welcome with me Mr. and Mrs. Turner.
Hey guys, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Schumann, Robert Schumann, who's a composer of this music. Tell you a little bit about the music itself, just a little bit of background about that. The only thing I want to talk to you guys about is what this is tonight. Usually when you see somebody dressed like we are dressed in this position, it's a recital. And I walk out and I bow and I don't ever talk to any of you, and I just sing and he just plays, and then at the very end you guys clap and we bow and then we leave. And that's really not what we intended for tonight to be like. Tonight is a lecture recital, which is a little bit different. It means that we are doing music together and then we're also talking about it. But we added another element, which is actually something I've never really seen before, to be wrong, very new, which is a discussion element to this as well. We are going to do about 3 of these pieces at a time, and we're going to talk to you about it, and you're going to talk to us about it. Things I like to tell my students, and this goes for all of you, there are no stupid questions. Really, if it's a question that you're wrestling with, ask the question. We might ask you questions as well, but it's important that you guys get to know what's going on. You have the text in front of you. You have the German, in case you're fluent in German. And then you also have the English on there as well, so you know what each piece is about, generally. But also, it's poetry and German song, so you might still not know what it's about when you get done. So I want you guys to ask questions. We'll ask you questions as well. Okay? Okay, got it. Oh, another part of this is that this is a song cycle. And in a song cycle, there's multiple songs. They're different. There's a little bit of time in between each one of them. And you might think, oh, she finished her song, and start clapping. But you don't have to do that in this. You can clap at the very, very end. They all actually kind of run together. This piece has 8 songs all together in the song cycle that fit together, but they're not one endless story, if that makes sense. They're little vignettes, little pictures, little moments in the life of a woman in particular. And so you'll see right here at the top of your handout I wrote, Frauenliebe und leben, A Woman's Love and Life, is a song cycle written by Robert Schumann in 1840, what we call his Meterjahr. So he wrote a ton of music during that year, so much so that it was dubbed his Meterjahr. Just broke all this music. And it was written for his wife, Clara. The text was not composed by Schumann, but rather by Adelbert von Chamisso, who is a Frenchman, a French-born German, no, German-born Frenchman with an Italian last name. And he wrote the text in 1830. The text describes the course of a woman's love for her husband from her point of view, from first sight through marriage, becoming a mother, and eventually his death. Schumann chose not to set the 9th poem of the cycle for reasons which remain unknown. I find that really kind of fascinating too, because there's so many letters between Clara and Robert, and there's so much documented, but as far as we know, there's not really any sort of documentation as to why he didn't want to set that. For your guys' good, I found the last poem and put it in here, so we can talk about that at the end as well. Yeah, what else? Anything else you could think of?
That's fantastic.
Great. Robert Schumann and Clara, I think he wrote this a couple months before they got married. So Robert really loved Clara, really liked her, and her dad was real mad and didn't want them to get married, so much so that he actually took him to court at one point to try to stop it, but they ended up still getting married. They had, I believe overall they had 6 children at some point together, and Clara herself was an amazing pianist. So something worth noting is that this was written by Schumann, the text by Chamisso, for Clara. When it was premiered, the first time it was ever done, Clara was at the piano. And one of her best friends, who was a baritone, a man, was singing. One reason why this song cycle is so incredibly interesting, there's all kinds of song cycles, by the way, but this one is so incredibly interesting because the piano actually acts very independently of the voice in a lot of ways. So something I want to give you guys something to listen to is to really listen to the voice. You're going to listen to me. I'm loud. I'm in front. I'm singing in German. You're going to notice what I'm saying. But try your hardest to really listen to what's going on in the piano as well. There are beautiful lines that work well with the singer, but also stand beautifully along that arrow. You do think? It does.
Oh, you did it fabulously.
Oh, wonderful.
I don't want to be smirched. You're fantastic.
Well, in that case, we're going to do the first 3 movements first, and then we're going to take a break. So if any of you have pencils, like you can work, you have pencils, pens, all that. You write stuff down. Look at all the extra space I gave you on here. You can write keep down on here. It wasn't just an accident because I couldn't format it well. The very first movement, Seit ich ihn gesehen, is the first time she lays eyes on her beloved, and she thinks that she's blind. She has been blinded to everything else. The second movement, der Herrlichste von allen, is all about how wonderful he is, how handsome he is, how amazing he is, all of those moments of it. And then the third movement, Ich kann nicht fassen, nicht glauben, she say, I can't believe he even looked at me because he's so handsome. I just sang a whole other song about how wonderful and handsome he is. So those are the first 3 movements. And again, you'll see you'll have a little pause.
gar nicht belegt. Ich hätte doch Unterrollen, ich aber erhöht und vergnügt. Ja, was habe gesprochen, ich bin auf ewig da. Ja, weiß ich träume noch immer, es kann ja nimmer so sein, es kann ja nimmer so sein. Oh, lass ihn tragik sterben, geweget an seine Brust, den seligen Tod verschreiben, in der Frieden unendlichen Lust. Ich kann's nicht lassen, nicht glauben, es hat an mich belegt. Ich hätte doch Unterrollen, dich aber erhöht und vergnügt.
What did you hear? Yay. German. Great. What did you hear? We'll ask some more questions if you guys want to.
It's some takes.
Yes. What was the first one right? This song. What about singing?
Happy, acting.
Singing was happy. And it was much faster, but it was much faster at first. And then it got even more fast, right? With the next one. Did you notice something special or different about the very last of those three? There was a lot of movement, which is very romantic, like this romantic era music when it's right, like very, very fast, very slow, these different emotions. Something about the way, yeah.
I don't think I was going to answer what you were asking.
Maybe.
I don't know if I was making this up. In the second one, after the lyrics ended, because some of those lyrics struck me with, I don't know where it is. Oh, blissful sorrow. It struck me as like truly loving, right? If he's happy with someone else, right?
Yeah.
She's choosing to be happy even though it's not with her. But did I hear some of that in the final bars after the lyrics ended? It seemed like overall it's happy, but it seemed like, and I don't have the music.
Are you talking the third movement particularly?
I think the
The first one?
Actually, I was thinking into the second one.
That's the one with the jazzy ending.
That's the one with the jazzy ending.
Yeah, maybe I heard the jazz. I don't know what it was, but something sounded like a little bit of not quite happy.
There's a kind of dreamy chromaticism that'll come up a lot, especially at EPs or movements. It has very electric jazz. I think you're on this.
I like dreamy.
What do you think that is?
Well, for me, it kind of connected to those lyrics.
Yeah.
How there was a little bit of sorrow in the bliss.
Yeah. Because it wasn't sad, right? The music, it wasn't sad. There were aspects of it that pointed to a sorrow, but not sad. Overall, the song isn't sad, right?
I'm interested, you use the word lyrics. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong, but how might that be similar or distinct from a poem being set to music?
Hmm.
When something is lyrical, what does that mean as opposed to, maybe not opposed to, I mean. So, in a section, Mrs. Turner had mentioned it kind of given the format of what a concert is like, right? Especially in classical music, you become somewhat of this museum piece. You know, you come, you're dressed to the nines, you play, people sit, they're silent, everyone's proper and quiet. But I don't know, did you go in what the format or performance like this would have been, like especially a song cycle?
Well, a lot of it would have been actually a lot like this. Like, this was actually written for something like this. The only difference is we would probably be at someone's house, from a larger area of their house.
And it's quite likely that the poetry would be quite familiar, right? I mean, Riese would be the realm with Eine, Goethe would be another one, right? And so it would be like coming for a feast. They probably would have feasted beforehand.
It would have been.
Or probably drinking and smoking. Yeah. See, next time we'll get this, right? Or this could have been in a salon as well, right? You know, various romantic artists are portraying their art, but there would have been a pretty familiar knowledge of what was going on with the poetry. Of course, we're perhaps, and maybe accessing this myself for the 10th or 11th time. But we have some learning to do in that regard. But I think there's a helpful distinction to be made, Mr. Latino, because these are lyrics. Certainly something that's lyrical, one thinks of line, one thinks of like a message being delivered that's here. But there's something here where the composer is making a commentary, musical commentary on the poetry that's being said. And I think actually the deeper meaning of that, kind of find this motive, this chromatic jazzy motive, right, is a very good example of that.
And you'll want to listen for that because that comes back in different ways, in different songs. Be really listening for some of that chromaticism, the jazzy chromaticism. That's what I call it. I like it. And I like that it comes through sometimes when the singer is singing, but it tends to be exclusive of rap. Like oftentimes it'll be at the very end of the song. It doesn't really take the attention away from what the singer is doing. Here's some chromaticism in as it tends to be at the end. It's like the comment. It's like the pianist is commenting on it in some song, which is nice. Yes?
A question. I know you mentioned that his wife was the pianist when it was first performed.
Yes.
But Hugh wrote it for her to be the pianist, correct?
Yes.
Do you know if you said there was a baritone singer who was also singing about Riptide? Was it also written with that particular performer in mind?
You know, it's a really good question. I don't know. It tends to be that when a composer is writing for something for someone and they know the people involved, like he knew Clara, and I know it was, I can't remember his name, starts with J, but the baritone that sang it was really good friends with Clara. Like they knew each other well. So I would have to believe that somehow they all worked together on this. Somehow, like when Schumann wrote this, he probably gave it to be gone through by the baritone as well and said, hey, does this work? And he'd probably go, oh, this doesn't really work. Can you do this here? Can we do that? And would change it a little bit that way too.
I don't know that we would really have Robert Schumann without Clara Schumann, and not just simply because of their marriage, but she's a very respected composer in her own right, but she was a force as a musical performer. She was very, very popular. And so, just for simple promotion, Mr. Schumann would write music just so she would perform it, right? Yeah. So that is another reason why he just simply composed. He himself was a pianist. They took, obviously, from her father. However, he developed a contraption where he tried to rest a finger while the other ones played, and he actually debilitated himself. So he was no longer able to play because he was trying to develop an invention of some kind. He was kind of insane, as a matter of fact.
He only was.
And that's part of what you see. I think someone had mentioned kind of the shades of differences in the composition. He established characters kind of in his early 20s. He was a music critic. They're known as Florestan and Eusebius. Some people have speculated as to maybe he was going through some kind of psychosis because he associated kind of names with invisible friends. This is what he called them. He called them invisible friends. He would actually invoke them when he was doing music criticism. But Eusebius was this kind of passive, kind of melancholic creature, if you will. Florestan was the more kind of passionate and vivacious one. And so he plays with this kind of chiaroscuro, this light and dark character in this. Yeah, so I could maybe go on. I'm sorry. Get into it some further context. You look like you're ready to sing. The other thing I wanted to say is, did you notice how well I was listening to my wife? Thank you.
You know, you got what I wanted, which was the third one. It starts with no introduction. Ich kann's nicht fassen, nicht glauben, which is really scary for us. And the next one actually starts that way too. It's the same note. It's the same note. They look like different, it's the same key, but they're different keys, just so you know when we start the next one. But why? I think it's really cool. Did you have something?
So my impression listening to those three, and I don't know if this actually played out in music, but it felt like in the first one, the piano part was in some way anticipating or bringing in something in the vocal part. But like each turn piano part was something that was about to come in the vocal part. And in the second one, it was almost reversed. It felt like the piano was trying to keep up. And it was something about the beginning of the third movement. Maybe it was you coming in first, and then like the spacing between, but it felt like a dance between the two of them. It felt like there are specific steps with you stepping first.
I love that third movement, this third movement, because it feels like a dance. Ich kann's nicht fassen, nicht glauben. You kind of want to dance along with it. And he really just has these block chords in there. We have to both be counting, hopefully, and by listening too. But because I take a lot of time in here, there was a lot of movement. Like he really, at Vocalist, has to listen to what's going on, particularly in my breathing. When I take a breath, so he knows how much faster or slower I'm going to go right there too. But the first words of this, I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it, right? So I think it's so cool to start a piece where you go, Ich kann's nicht fassen, nicht glauben. It sets up your character so easily at that point to say, I can't believe it, and it comes right out of nowhere. So this next song, we're going to do the next three, Der Ring, Du Ring an meinem Finger. And that is followed by Help mir Schwestern and Süßer Freund. And these are all distinctly different. Now, Der Ring, this next one that we're doing, is the middle, really kind of the middle of this overall work, number 4. And it's a very different piece when you hear it. It's in what we would call essentially an ABA form. It sounds like an aria of sorts. It sounds like a full scene. You get a theme, you get something a little bit different, and then it comes back. It's the only one of these songs that really functions that way, and he put it right in the middle. And this to me has been so very interesting because Brahms, who was a friend of all of these, and in fact so much of a friend that probably too close of a friend to Clara, because there's a lot of history there that there was some sort of relationship. But Brahms, when he wrote his Requiem, wrote it so that everything was in an arc. So if you look at the page, there's arcs all over it. And number 4, the number 4 movement of that is really the high point of it. And I find it very interesting that the number 4 movement of this is kind of a high point in that way too. We'll do this next. Der Ring. about those? Were they a little different from the first ones and from each other? What do you say? What did you hear?
I was a little nervous that she sounded very reconciled, so like, well, this is marriage, you know? But then she sounded much happier with her. She spoke of her wedding day, so I felt much happier. But it did, the golden rain sounded slow and longing, and kind of a sense of departure, like a mourning for her childhood. It says that.
Yeah, I think that's very right. Like she is, and that's funny. I think that one is in engagement, right? Because she's not married. She's asking her sisters to help her in the next one. So she's engaging. So it is a funny place to be in. Like she shouldn't be so sad. She shouldn't be like, where's the marriage? It was really heavy. She should still be pretty excited. But I think it's so important. The text translations are different from one to the other. That's something I should have told you guys about. Also, these are poetic translations, so it's not a word-for-word translation of these as well. But one of my favorite parts of that song is when she says, I see now what you mean, my eyes have been opened to the vision of a life that I have never seen. That part of the music, actually, the actual translation, a better translation of that, is that she actually sees herself in him. That's what it is, in deinem Glanz is what she says, and that she finds herself in him. And that's heavy, but that's cool, right? Especially when thinking about what marriage is, to find oneself in a marriage partner. That's a really cool side. And that is the very sort of end of the B section of that music before it returns to where she's actually thinking about a ring. So when a performer does that, sometimes I did this. This was the first song, one of the first songs I ever did in college. I don't know why my teacher gave it to me because I was like 20 and I had no idea what any of this was about. But it's an easy standalone song to sing, right? It's easy to listen to. You could listen to that song and be quite content because you don't need the whole story, right? But a lot of times, someone performing it will touch a ring or mimic or something like that at the beginning and then go back to it at the end. Because there is a real beginning. She's actually talking, do ring your ring on my finger, right? And talking about the ring in particular. And then she goes into talk about the person.
Yeah, it's actually funny with do ring on my finger, that actually takes the, and I said it the very American way.
Do ring on my finger.
Ring on my finger. But that actually, Mr. Latino, kind of that chromatic motif you were pointing out, I mean, that actually now appears in the texture of the music itself. So she's singing bum 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 go. Right. So he's now implanting it kind of in the music. That's something that when we brought that up, I kind of noticed that there. This is why you do these things, so that like people point out to you the things that like you don't notice.
That you miss. Yes.
At the very end, I was intrigued because from what you said about the end, I wrote down a soft ending with resolution almost sounds like a lullaby, and that whole feeling of like being the sisters and the sadness and the longing for childhood, and yet the peace of nighttime, going to sleep in your family. You know, I just thought, was there something in the end in the piano that was...
Are you talking about the fourth
Just the
movement?
piano.
Yeah, sure, because this is what happens there.
It actually sounds very much like Guten Abend, guten Nacht. To have that moving, that's a Brahms leader, right? Very similar to
Another thing that Brahms stole.
that. Another, that's bad.
Bad job.
You know what did you guys think about the ending of number 5?
Like that. Because it slowed down, and then those last two lines were back to kind of the joyful
Yes.
part. But right before that, it had really slowed down and like just really got into that emotion of that phrase.
And it gets happier?
Yeah, I actually said it slowed down and moves like a train of a wedding dress.
Yeah. Not a problem. I read that actually there's another line to this that I couldn't find anywhere that was not set. I want to know what that line is. But I guess it was something that was it had much darker, more sad tone to it, and he wanted to end on something that was happier. I love the ending of this one too because it sounds like a wedding march. It sounds like, some sort of wedding march. I don't like that it ends on just a bum. Have you ever noticed it? Dun, 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 and ends on one, on its own. You don't know what
I
it
thought
is.
something was missing, like it needed something else
Yeah.
after that.
I do too. I don't know what it was. He didn't set the last line, and then he didn't apparently finish the song.
I think that's actually my fault because I was not
It is
really.
not.
No, well, I'll
That's
tell you.
okay.
I'll tell you. No, but let me tell you why. Because actually, it's supposed to be a piano to a diminuendo, and I played it too loudly.
No, but
Because
the
I-
whole point is that it's short.
Yeah,
Like,
but
it feels
check-
like it needs something else.
Check this out though. I think what's happening is that so you have the bells in the beginning. I feel like that's the outside of the church, and then this is the wedding march that is inside the church, and the wedding. So like you see them going inside, and like the sound goes away as you're still outside the church. That's supposed to like this. That's what I'm saying. I think that's maybe what he was going for there. I totally did not deliver that. So
It's not your fault. Actually, you're fired. I can do it right. Just kidding. That would be awful. What about number 6? Süßer Korn. Did anybody like that one? That's my favorite. I like that one. It's very different than the other ones. It's longer. This does have kind of an A section too. It goes back and forth, but it's longer. I also just think it's funny that the longest one is the one where she's like, "Hey, we just got married. Who wants to have a baby?" She's like, "There's a cradle right here, right here, right," and it's like 5 minutes long out of a 20-minute song. So, I like that one most. Good. Okay. We're doing pretty well on time. Mrs. Minkle was supposed to be here to keep me on time. And flag me and walk around the sign. I'm doing it on my own. And we're doing well. Okay, we have 2 more to do. An meinem Herzen, an meiner Brust. This is the song about her becoming a mother. And that is followed by Nun hast du mir den ersten Schmerz getan. This is the last time, or the only time you really hurt me. You really given me pain, which is really bad.
An meinem Herzen, an meiner Brust, du meine Wohnung, du mein Genuss, das vergiss sie niemand, die Liebe so schnell. Ich hab gesagt und nie mehr zurück, hab mir beschwert, gestellt. Wir werden aber jetzt, nur niemand weiß, nur niemand liebt das Kind, den sie die Naht liebt. Nur eine Mutter weiß allein, was Liebe heißt und glücklich sein, wo Liebe gar nicht noch stehen kann, denn Worte nötig will ich kann. Du Liebe, 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 du schaust mich schon auf mir zu tun, an meinem Herzen, an meiner Brust. Du meine Wunde, du meine Brust. Nun hast du mir den ersten Schmerz getan, der aber traf. Du schläfst, du harter Umgang
The music at the end of that one, was that kind of a reference back to the very first piece? With the rests and the... It's really neat how that...
And it's actually, it's not an exact replica, so it kind of has this semblance of like memory, right? So it's recapturing that, but it's transformed from, you know.
Kind of a callback to that.
Correct. I don't know that it's so much inaccurate, just developed, I suppose.
Changed, really. Alice says, like, you know, he dies to you finish singing, right? But you have done fine. Yeah. I just like going into that for a second. Yeah.
No, well, the poem that he does not set is actually, so the character, the narrator, the lady is an old lady now talking to her grandchild. So one wonders, and maybe you might have, maybe you mentioned that at the beginning. But I mean, we wondered if perhaps it's just, you know, an unspoken kind of
Maybe you could set it and just
The
tell it
oration.
without words,
So
so the
that-
same tune to the beginning, right? Some sort of like circular going back, because it is changed slightly. The music is changed slightly. It's not exactly the same. If it were exactly the same, I would think about it more as a real memory, maybe, or maybe just even a calling back to that.
in the first movement, she's a youth at this point,
She's
right?
young.
Yeah. And so now she's old, and she, I believe in that last poem, you have to remind me, but she's actually conveying this to
Her granddaughter.
Granddaughter.
One of the hardest parts about doing this entire work is that it's a woman at different ages. So the voice at the beginning is never going to sound like the voice at the end, right? And when I did this when I was 20 or so, or like the do ring on my finger, I probably sounded like I was 20, and I was in that area, maybe a little bit, maybe more at the beginning of this, right?
You still sound like you're 20.
Thank you. But it's hard as a performer. I can't not take in my instrument, and just like the ending of this
there is a knowledge, right? The changed part of it is a knowledge of love. The human voice has that. As you grow, as you change, as you get older, there is a knowledge that is brought into that, a changing that is brought into that. So the first time, we actually worked on this years ago with a coach, and we sang the first movement. We got done, and of course we thought it was beautiful. And he was like, you don't sound young. You sound like an old married couple. And we were like, but we did all the right things. But there's a rediscovering of what it means to set eyes on your beloved for the first time. Any of you who are married, hey, remember what it was like to set eyes on your spouse for the first time. It might not be the same exact thing as when you set eyes on them when you go home tonight. It's probably different. But both of those are beautiful, and they're changed in some way, right? We often talk about this, how we've changed physically since we've been married, but we always talk about how much more beautiful we think each of us is, and how we, of course, we look at youth and we think, oh, you're beautiful when you're young, and you get old, you get all the lines, and you're not beautiful, but we see it in our marriage as being so much more beautiful because of those things that we've gone through together, right? And so I think that ending part, that just the piano is that growth, is that change. But of course, it's still that same love that was there at the very beginning, the very beginning.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think it translates to Clara's life.
Yeah.
Because she gave up so much. She was a concert pianist and then became a mother, a wife, and basically her life as a performer was ended. So you just said it in beautiful words with your marriage. Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
It was certainly changed. She was still able to perform, but you're right. It was much modified. I think you also bring up something interesting. Maybe you don't want to open this can of worms, but especially kind of considering German idealism, right? This is post-Goethe, right? We're getting into kind of, post-Hegelian. This is Kantian philosophy now, right? There's moral rationalism now is coming on of that high idealism. But you still have a man writing about a woman talking about loving a man, and a man is writing the music. And I would be interested to know particular feminine perspective, right? Because on that, I think of if you've read, for instance, Faust. We mentioned this with the thing, but Faust does this. Goethe does this with Marguerite, for instance. Of course, there's many operas there, and I'll just say this. It strikes me as very forensic, right? It's treated as kind of like this machine, right? I wonder how empathetic it is, but.
I was going to ask that because when I'm doing some research for this, I came across an article that said the heading was, why would any self-respecting woman perform Schumann's Frauenliebe und leben? And I was like, and it was primarily because of that. It was poetry written by a man, music set by a man about women's feelings and how they change and their love changes. And as far as we know, Clara didn't write anything terrible that was like, and wrong, right? As far as we know, it was well received by her. And the question, we did this for the college students last week, and I asked the women, I said, is this an accurate portrayal of life change, love life changes through the poetry and the music? And it was so funny, none of the girls wanted to talk about it. They all came up to me in the hallway later, and they were like, I couldn't talk about it in front of the boys. Can we meet later? Sure. And I told him that later, and he was like, dang it, that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear if this was an accurate portrayal. What do you guys think? Can I tell you the one that the An meinem Herzen, an meiner Brust with the baby? That's the one that I was like, so I get it. But also, having had 7 babies, I didn't have that kind of energy. When I was nursing a baby or holding a baby, I feel like that's a little idealistic for what it means to have a baby. But the excitement of having a baby, at least for the first time, is probably similar. I don't know.
And he's writing this at the beginning of his marriage to Clara, right?
Yeah.
This is 1840, so he's finally won his bride from her father and all of that. So
They have not yet had a baby.
got a lot of kind of positive energy.
Yeah. What do you think? That's okay, we don't want to talk about it here.
The energy level in that one was humorous.
Yes, yes.
Like, the words were fine,
Yeah.
and the music was lovely, but it was a lot.
Yeah, and that was the first one that, when I first did this, it first struck me that way. I just went, oh no. I feel like that's not. Hindsight's 20/20. What about the, no, yes.
I do think that was kind of the first thing that struck me was that it was a man writing this. He wrote this for his wife, and I was kind of giggling because in like the fourth one, I was thinking like a set that was like, I wrote this song for you about how much you love me, and it's like to give to it. For now, I just wish to serve him, to give to one so bold, to be loyal to all of his wishes. It's kind of, oh, it almost was like, almost can kind of sound like, here's what I want you to do.
Here's a list.
And I want you to be this kind of second.
You know what you do? You were like, can I do this? Can I do this list?
I can see it in like modernized. I can see it like if you might look at it like this is how I want you to act. It is sweet. Part of it is sweet, but it is a little kind of
A little much.
a little much.
Right before a wedding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder how any of us would have felt before we got married if we would have been handed that song. Right? Because there's a part of me that's like, he wrote me a song, which would be really wonderful. And then halfway through it, you're like, you want me to do what? But again, historically, looking at the time period, looking at what marriages would have looked like at that point too, looking at what it really means to serve a spouse, right? Which is incredibly important in a marriage, at any marriage. But yeah, I think that's totally spot on. Yeah.
So you said it was early in their marriage.
So he wrote this, I want to say he finished it like right before they got married, a couple weeks.
I mean, if you're early in your marriage, you might still be setting some of the ways you communicate successfully. What a great exercise. If they had lots of back and forth writing and dialogue about all of these different stages of life, many couples might not ever look forward until they're upon the precipice.
Working, letting it go. Very good. Or by a sunset. All the things.
It's also just the music that figures it, right? So I mean, even he could be commenting with music, calm swinging acts in some places on the text as well. Right?
Sure.
I don't know if that's accurate.
No, actually, no, I think that's true, especially, I think that that and The Last Insight are helpful because he and Carl were very much in dialogue. And of course, when you're a romantic musician in that era, you're just kind of like this aficionado of many things, like not a dilettante, but you say a lot about a lot of things. And so, Stephen literature, poetry, he and Barbara had a lot of exchanges regarding many of these movements. And so this probably would have been, and it's been a kind of commentary for her to reflect on as well.
What about the last one?
Oh, look, wait, so when you say the last one, you need it up to 9 front of it.
The eighth the last song, the eighth one. Oh, you up the ninth, then the Hanukkah yeah. What about the eighth song?
I laughed at this one.
You did?
Now, for the first time, you've caused me.
I must have died the day after.
College students, Malachi looked up and he was like, really? You left me with that at 9 o'clock in the morning? So sorry, very happy. This has been an interesting one interpretationally for us artistically, and particularly for me. It's a lower tessitura in my voice. It doesn't get particularly high. It gets to like kind of the middle part of my voice, and what is really kind of the strongest part of my voice. So there's a little bit of, in the middle there's a place where I could be very strong with it, but then the rest of it is really pretty low. And it lies in what's called the lower passaggio area, and the lower passaggio is not as strong as chest voice. So the part where it is Ishla, that's chest voice, right? And that's a really strong part of the mezzo-soprano voice as well. So there's a lot of color painting with the voice in here, but it overall just sounds angry. And so I asked him one day when we were going through it, I said, is it too angry? And just for context, my voice type in particular, I'm a mezzo-soprano, and I am what would be a full lyric or dramatic mezzo-soprano. And different voice types have different colors and characteristics to them, and they actually generally play different characters. So when I go to play a character, it's usually a mom, a wayward woman, an old lady, sometimes a boy, or what else? Oh, and generally a witch, or the comedic relief. That's usually what it is, and it's based on the color of the voice. I don't get hired as an ingenue. When I am an ingenue, it's a wayward woman. It's not an ingenue, it's that, But I don't get hired for that because my voice doesn't sound like that. Even when I try to sound lighter, higher, brighter, it doesn't transmit a youthful, young character, right? So this song, that's where my voice goes naturally. So I usually have to pick songs that either work with that or sometimes, because if I do a recital that's all that, you guys would be so sad. It would be all about death. But I have to pick things that kind of work within that. So this song does, but maybe not some of the other ones, right? So like the very first one, and even though the On Minor Herz and On Minor Brust almost sounds a little bit angrier, again, because of the color of my voice. But I asked him, I said, with this one, is it too angry? And he was like, what do you think? He actually, we were saying, he goes, would you be mad at me if I died? And I was like, yes. We have 7 children. No, but to that point, I think anyone, if you lose a spouse, there would have to be some sort of anger at losing them, especially if they're lost early and unexpectedly, which I do think this poem is. It's some sort of, I don't think they're 90, right, or 80 or something. I think it seems to be, there's nothing else between having a baby and then him dying, so I'm wondering if it's not pretty soon. There would have to be some sort of anger in there, and you hear throughout that piece that anger, it lives, right? It gets quieter, it gets lighter. So obviously that is a person wrestling with what it means to lose someone, to grieve, which we all know has many states in it. So yeah.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Did we also hear several of the same note consecutively in that melody?
Yes, and there's a couple reasons for that, I think. One of the first ones being that this one, I turned it around. It's almost like what we call recitative in opera. So recitativo or recitative in opera is when the singer is singing, but they're speaking kind of. They're singing on one note or just a couple notes, and it gives a lot of story. And it's usually a lot of story that you can understand. Whereas, say, an aria is when an opera singer stands up there and they just say, I'm sad, and they sing these beautiful lines for like 8 minutes about how sad they are, but the story doesn't really move along. And this one, the story does kind of move a little bit more. I guess a lot of them do. But those repeated pitches in there really help to get the text across like you're speaking. And it's actually in the range, that lower passaggio, where nun hast du mir den Ernst, and that's kind of where I speak, right? It's a similar place right there. So yes, you did hear that. And I think it's a little bit, there's an aria that I sing called Va la succulade mes larmes. It's a French aria where she talks about teardrops dropping on her heart, and it's like a hammer on her heart. And I feel like this is a little bit like that too, that kind of hammering away, is to continue it, hammering. You like the nice poem?
I did.
Yeah. Why? Why didn't you say it?
Well, I don't know, but it reminded me, I think I liked it a lot because it reminded me of, so we have boy, girl, boy. And when my daughter was born, it felt like, I don't know, more important or something. It felt like,
Also, them say.
yeah, or not, like, just like, it felt like more of a responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
I was just like, wow, like, I don't know, there was just something like about that. That I felt like is sort of communicated here, like daughter of my daughter, like, I don't know, like the maternal lines going on, and you like the memory keepers and the heart keepers, and the ones that teach others how to love. And yeah, may your courage stand firm, may you love sorrow, then be your dearest possession. And I think that like something that I like about this whole thing is like the combination of like love is joy and sorrow mixed together. So I just love that, like, maternal knowledge that they passed on from our daughter and her daughters. Yes.
I love that you said that because we were talking the other day about how to do this, and of course I have a grade school class, so we often will listen to something and I'll get a real question and we'll start discussing. And the question that kept coming back into my mind was, what is the relationship of pain to love? Because if you think about it, even with a lot of the motifs and how this is set, there is pain throughout all of it, right? There is pain throughout that. And so what is that relationship of pain to love? What do you think?
I mean, it can be, just like the sorrowful mother, like your heart is pierced, right? So I think like there's so often you talk about like the piercing effect of beauty, and I feel like that's part of being human, that we're fallen, we're like separated from what we're created for and where we're meant to be. So I think when we strive for like the greatest union of love, which love is like where we're made for, that we feel that separation into like peace.
Yeah, you mentioned the sorrowful mother. There's some great music settings of Stabat Mater. Confident with this Doc is a romantic setting. Perdo Lacy is very, very good as well. That actually has a lot of kind of, again, some of those contrasts, the same movements here. I like the, actually, some of the comments, there's the article that you found, why would a self-respecting woman perform this? I mean, first of all, it's good music, it's good chords, just at a level. But you actually bring up something that's very interesting. It's too bad that last poem was not set, because that does get into an element which is kind of missed, right? All of this is kind of centered around kind of, the female reaction to, the male lover, right? And so that is, I'm not saying that it's not explored, wonderfully it is, but you kind of miss kind of a whole comprehensive element that would have been nice to hear. It's just almost kind of like a footnote.
What it is to understand love.
But that was probably not in his, that was not encapsulated in his imagination at the time, because he was just starting on this journey as an early life. So.
Something else I read when I was studying this was that often Clara, when she would perform this, would stop at number 5 and would not perform anything. She'd get us and leave. Yeah, exactly. I mean, she was at the piano, so she was kind of controlling it. Like, I'm done, and then it would end. What do you think about that?
That is the African married.
Yep.
Sold out till after the wedding.
I'm just gonna play the parts that work good.
Well, I think some of it is that the rest of it does get a little challenging, right? I mean, all of the rest of it is very challenging, and sometimes people don't want to wrestle with that openly in art, right? Like there can be a real aversion to Zeus or Freund. This one in here is the most exposed emotionally, I think, except for the last one. And so I think that, and then I think even the mother becoming a mother, they're so emotionally exposed that it might have been that she didn't want to go there as an artist, or maybe she couldn't, right? Because she was in it. That could have been a part of it too.
Well, and you were saying that it has to do with life experience. If she hadn't gone there personally, she might not have had the experience to put into it, or like you're saying, she might not have just wanted to. And I don't know at what age she stopped, but if she stopped performing it while she was still very young, then maybe she just, and who wants to sing about your husband dying? I mean,
You're
who
right.
wants to do that?
No one does. I'm sorry. I left it with you too, and now.
You sing about it all the time.
Sounds sad though. Thank you. She thanked me.
Well, actually, the first time I laid eyes upon her, we'll talk. I mean, she was actually singing about death. I was like, wow, I have never heard death sound so good.
Good. Do you guys have any other questions? Like any other questions about singing, playing piano, either of us? You can ask any questions you want to. Maybe not questions that I prompted you. Yes.
You mentioned the baritone friend of Clara.
Yes.
Did you address why that was the first performance, right?
Yes.
Why was it a man singing the woman's part?
I have no idea. The only thing I can think of is that he was just a really good friend. The only other thing I can think of is that this is actually, it really was set for a mezzo-soprano, and the baritone voice is the male version of the mezzo-soprano, essentially. So the range, the tessitura, all of this would fit really well in his voice. Maybe it would have been even more awkward for another woman to sing it, right? Because he wrote it for Clara, so maybe that would be weird. I don't know. But I don't know why.
It might also fit in kind of to the male perspective of like female love, right? Which I think works here. So the male is displaying that. Also, in an art song, you can suspend imagination much more. Things take, for instance, like Schubert, like Irrkönig, right? The Goethe poem. That should be a man singing it. And you're impersonating both the Irrkönig, the father, and the son, but women can sing it as well. And we've had kind of heated debates even in terms of like, you know, how much in the character should the voice be, but
I think you could be fluid in that regard.
Another question.
Yes. The title of the song cycle, was that original to the poems that Chamisso wrote, or was that a title that Schumann?
It was Chamisso's. That was the title that he had given it. And if you look this up online and you start researching it, there's like 7 different titles. Like some of them will say Frauenliebe und leben. Some of them say Frauenliebe und with the line leben right there. There's a lot of, some of them just say Frauenliebe. There's a lot of different names for it. There have been lots of other composers who have actually set this as well. Not many famous composers that you speak of that Lowe was one of them. I don't know who that is. But a lot of people did set this as well.
Did you know him personally, the writer and Chamisso?
The poet? I don't think so. We were talking about this earlier. I bet because they were kind of around the same time period. The poetry was written about 10 years earlier. And people in the circle of like the literary circle, the people that they hung out, they probably knew of the poem, the poetry, and the poet when he died. But I don't think they knew each other closely. Like I don't think they got to work on this together. There's no, again, Clara Ann and Schumann, Robert Schumann wrote a lot of letters. They wrote down a lot of things, and none of that has been in any of it. So I don't think that they knew him personally. And he died. Chamisso died 2 years before this was performed. So you can see it.
Are some cycles a romantic era thing? Are
Yeah.
they common in other eras?
It's very good that you asked that. I was actually just reading about that recently, that they go back as early as the 1300s or 1400s, but it was something that was very iconic in the Romantic era, in particularly German. So there are certainly other countries and other backgrounds that do some sort of song cycle, but they became just incredibly iconic for that the German literature. So much of it also because of the naturalistic background most of it has to do with nature, love, dreams, heroes, and a lot of that relates to the literature that's going on during that same time. Also something to keep in mind, I said this one other time, and I hope you guys realize this, like this was written for this type of thing, and this was rather common then. People would gather in a place, at a house or somewhere else with a piano, and somebody would get up and sing songs this way. You've all seen movies where they do that, right? It really was a thing. That's how they communicated. That was their entertainment. That was their community, right? Their social community in that sense. So. Song cycles in particular in this kind of setting were really big in the German social setting. There were other ones, but it wasn't as big and as iconic. Also mainly because of the composers who did. Schumann, Schubert, right? Who else? Brahms. And they were all Germans also.
And just the main things and builders of the movie say that
All you saw.
Paul.
I think you both capture the mood amazingly of these songs, and it translates in this passage as, you know, the rain, get married, become a mother. It translates on the piano and the voice part fantastically, how you guys get it. Like, you know, number 7, you can finish in there alone and be a piano concerto, right? And then how difficult it gets on the range of the voice as you progress in every other song. So you guys did an amazing job.
You don't have any other questions? I think we're done. And Laura wasn't even here to yell at me, and it's it's 8:28. We're 2 minutes early, Rick.
It's early.
You're 2 minutes early.
I was going to yell at you for her.
Oh, we can sit here silently for 2 minutes.
No other questions? Well, thank you. Thank you for